Unique building, obviously. Never seen anything like it. And you were given a budget in RFP for this project. And so my question is, do you think you could meet the budget, or how far over it? It looks to me like this would far exceed the Kimball's budget for this project. So would you care to comment on?
It's a good question. I can say this, we've never done a project where we haven't met our client's budget. Okay, we work in the arena of affordable housing, where a lot of our projects, you have a budget, there's not one penny more. If you're one penny over, there is no project. So we're accustomed to working with this in this way. And don't get me wrong, this is the beginning of a project. It's an idea. There are so many variables that still need to be discussed to get to that budget. And I think we can maintain this concept, and we can maintain this idea and get to the budget. Can we go over it dramatically? Absolutely. But for example, the facade, how do we do it? It's kind of odd for us because I'm not used to working of like throwing something at you and say here it is. The way we work is we gain input, and things that we propose really become a discussion point, and we try to shape that to meet the budget, meet the client needs, and so forth. So I guess to answer your question, it's a bit early to know exactly what the budget is, but do I think we can get there and maintain our concept and idea? Yes.
Right.
Larry, could you please talk a little bit about how one would maintain that honeycomb covering,
right.
To keep it clean, just to keep it fresh?
Again, this maybe ties a little bit into Jim's question. The building looks complex, but it's a standard construction building, a standard curtain wall. And the facade, what you see, is a rain screen. So it's non-waterproofed. So you don't have to go through the great detail of waterproofing tied in. What it does is it helps the energy of the building, creates it. So it's spaced away from the building. And there's the space where you can clean it. A lot of these materials too today, we work with vendors, and I remember I did a project one time using industrial brooms, and my client asked me the same question, and I didn't know the answer. So I asked the guy who manufactured the brooms, how do we clean this? And he said, there's all kinds of materials that are anti-static, anti-dust. Nothing will stick to it, And so part of it is to continue to work and work with our people, but we're not proposing something that has never been done. Rain screening with those kind of questions that need to be answered have been done over and over again.
Do you happen to have an actual sample of the material with you, or should we rely on the images on the
We don't have it, and we do have, but again, this is something I think as we move further, we need to have a dialogue with you, because there are certain things you may like, certain things you don't like, certain colors, certain honeycomb shapes, certain costs. It's a process. I don't really like forcing something on you. For me, it's a better building when we have a dialogue and we make those decisions. And it's at the end of the day, it's not my building, it's your building, and you need to kind of be part of that and embrace it. So I could show you really 60 things that we could discuss.
Maurice and then Prescott.
Larry, first of all, thank you for an absolutely extraordinary proposal and way in which you presented it, which goes far beyond even what we had in our written documents. I think the thing that I'm most attracted to about it is your conception of the public realm, how much you've been able to externalize what Kimball is doing and bringing the public in. It almost feels like there's no physical barrier, and yet in a place like Park City in winter, as intense as it is, that glazing on the ground floor is going to be a reality. And I guess I was just wondering how you were envisioning this to happen. Let's say in the dead of winter, this notion of an absolute transparency at the base.
Well, obviously you would do, a double or triple glaze system with the loading films and so forth. And we went so fast I can't get through everything, but we are even proposing these, it's a fairly common thing now, these solar tubes, which you can put behind the glazing that they absorb the heat in the water, and the idea was to heat the slab of the terrace out front, so you actually melt the snow in doing so. And we've been working with the Integral Group, and these things have all been vetted to the extent of the 5 weeks time that we've had. So my point is there are still questions that need to be answered, and we think we can answer those. Do I know the exact answer that you have? I wish I could say yes, but it still has to evolve. But we think with the high performance glazing, we do have some shading from the cloud piece that hangs over, but there's still work to do.
I just wanted to continue on that because I think another part of the project which I find very compelling is the public sequence. And I think there were a couple of shots that showed about the vertical ascent. That's pretty dramatic. I also like the idea that you moved from the plaza and you actually penetrate the historic building, and then it seems like you double back into the cloud and then you go up. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the sequence of moving up, the public part of moving up?
Yeah, for us, like when I came here the first time, the basement, as you guys call it, really feels like a basement. But in reality, it has a lot of north exposure and eastern exposure and some west. And I saw the potential to actually make that not a basement, but Main Street level. And so we wanted to transform that lower level was key to be part of the street and connect it really to Main Street. And what I talked about of kind of spatially fusing old and new, that was an intention so that you can move in and out between the two. And I think it makes your experience in the building better. If you just isolate the spaces, which Kimball has a need to do for, revenue generating events and, screaming kids. So it's, for us, it's like, how do you do that and still remain visually open? And so that's why we came up with these sort of floor plates that stack vertically, so you have immense flexibility in a constrained amount of space that has daylight and views and other things, but that can also be sectioned off as well, and vertical space connects that. But for us, what we always do is we won't do something that serves one purpose. We want it to serve many purposes. So to develop it as part of the energy system, like a net convection, heating and cooling, and bringing light is also key. So I'm sorry to be long, but it has a lot of variables that stitch it all together.
Prescott,
Larry, I think it's an incredibly inspiring building.
You do.
And very evocative. To use your terms, building as a visual icon and glowing beacon. I was trying to drive it in Park City last night, trying to envision that on the base of the canyon there, and complementing the illuminated payday skew slope. So I think it's. I think it would be a tremendous landmark for the city.
Thank you.
And I like your kind of reference to the Palladian building, that certain buildings deserve a kind of emblematic status. So I think it's just a evocative idea, and I'm glad you brought that forward. I guess one of the kind of implicit challenges in having a very kind of, I'll just use your term, evocative building, and you used the term Fred and Ginger. What came to mind for me was Marilyn's pleated sheer dress.
Well, that's not so bad. We should have consulted with you.
Next presentation.
So even I have a lot of room to improve.
But anyway, one of the challenges when you do a fairly or a very evocative building and a piece of architecture, especially the transparency, is how do you kind of let go of that once somebody comes in and then wants to have that kind of immersive experience with a piece of art or the act of making an art, so that the architecture slips away in terms of its dominance upon the presence and the experience. And I also noticed a bit of a challenge in having a gallery on the lowest level separated from a gallery on an upper level by a studio space, so it's less than a seamless kind of exhibit experience. So could you kind of respond to that?
Yeah, I guess they were asked for a large and small exhibit space, and so what I kind of took is that there's need for diverse programming, and conventional wisdom would say to put the two together and like make a divider. But what we try to do is, you go back to my original presentation about the experience of a building and not the object, is, I think, important. So I believe that Kimball, the heart of Kimball is the studio spaces. It's really about the people that come here that make art, the fusing of the community. So we wanted the studios to be like the gallery. That is the art we're seeing, is the people working at the corner, in the plaza, and then fusing into the large space. So I think we've set up, you guys, you empty the building for Sundance. I thought it wasn't a stretch to kind of transform the studio for extra large events and make it part of the large exhibit space, or let it be part, and then have the smaller space have the flexibility. So, even if you're having a large event, it could be leased out for a wedding reception or a meeting at the same time that things are going on. So, yeah, there are things we still need to discuss and I believe talk about. But for us, it's really about, I think we have a strong visual identity, but I think it's ultimately the way we think is about space and how it's used. And that's what I would think that our project would be a bitter disappointment if someone said our building was just something to look at.
Larry, if I could add to that, because I think part of Prescott's question was the idea of just kind of letting go and allowing the user to take over. And I think that's one of the beautiful aspects of the project, of this solution. Because Larry, and again, there's so much depth of thought, he doesn't have time to go into everything, but he's actually designed movable storage walls so that all of the studio spaces can be reconfigured so that you can have like a blackout experience, which I think is a very interesting component of how that can be viewed from the outside, where you might have, a floor that is blacked out, and that is sort of a signal that something special is occurring there. The other part of the solution in response to your question, and kind of getting back to Maurice's, is what Larry has really picked up on is the extreme social nature of Park City. He really picked up on the fact that Kimball is not really about displaying art, it's about the creation of art and how the community socializes and engages in that. So his solution, by allowing people to move through the building, circulate through the building, it's as much about increasing that socialization and watching people view the art and experience the building, as well as experience people making the art.
Tina.
I greatly appreciate the respect you've given to the historic building, having lived here so long and watched the evolution of this building. And I think yesterday I referred to the new building as a lantern. That's what it seems like to me. If built as presented, can you give me the square footage, the interior square footage, and then also the square footage of the exterior, the terrace space? I'm trying to get a handle on.
Actually, no. I wish I could. It's in our booklet. I'm sorry, I just don't have the figures, but I could, I can go away after this and tabulate it and get it all to you.
Okay,
You
but
got some
I think we
by
can
floor,
find
right?
it, so.
Yeah, it's summarized programmatically by floor. I don't have the surface area calculation.
So we'll just add up all the floors.
Well,
Okay.
we have a building total, I believe, as well.
Do you know how close you were?
Would you do that? I don't think it was findable.
Excuse me?
I don't think it was findable.
Oh, really?
No, I mean, would you mind doing that and get back to us?
Absolutely. Yeah, we met the program, we worked and met the program square footage is exactly what we did. It may be give or take a little bit, but we worked towards that programmatically. So we didn't add a bunch of space and we didn't take anything away. It is fundamentally the program. But I'm sorry if we didn't have the totals in there.
Because the tower is actually quite narrow.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And remember, we transformed the basement into a real usable space, so it doesn't require the need to stuff everything in an envelope over the building. So I think that's where the model kind of shows it the best.
So Stephen, is the root of Tina's question a sense that the building looks smaller than the program that we had given them?
Yeah, I think maybe there's an illusion once you have that honeycomb around it. It perhaps looks bigger than it is, but I was trying to get a handle on,
Right.
look at the floor plans, the tower looks like it's quite narrow.
No, it meets the program. I mean, part of the shaping of that too is, like I showed, I don't know if you call it just a square box volume. That looks giant, okay? And part of shaping this and sculpting it is to bring, the girth of it down so that it doesn't seem so big, but it is the right programmatic areas that are in there. If I took the same thing and took the average and extruded it to that square footage, it'd have a smaller overall footprint, but it would be a lot, perceptibly, a whole heck of a lot bigger.
Yeah.
A slightly different take on, I think, the same question that Tina's asking, but first I want to compliment you on a beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
I loved your description using the audio and that evolution of buildings as a trying to reflect the evolution of culture and the discussion of how buildings embody memory, not just the structure itself. So I really appreciate you thinking of, and not just thinking of those things, but really enunciating them in your presentation. Can you, and it's probably the same sort of piece, but with the interior piece of the new addition, can you explain a little bit more about the gallery space itself? Just in terms of looking in the book, it seems like we're limited in terms of how things can be hung and displayed in there. And it may just be
In terms of wall,
in terms of wall
hangable
space,
wall
yeah.
space, yeah. I mean, the way I always treat this is like you have an existing building that has, a whole array of north windows. Is you can always block those out, so I wouldn't dare close off windows so that you can display art. And typically, shows such as this, walls are put into place or moved and set up specific to the show. So I wanted it to be flexible enough so that you can host parties and other events that, where it's nice to have natural light and openness, but that you could make temporary walls and such to hang art however you want. If you decide that you want the windows blocked out, that can be done. And again, working with you further, a lot of these things, I'm working off of like one day of meeting with you, and trying to understand everything in, that moment. So my idea was to give you the maximum flexibility. I know you can make that space where you can hang art and have good art displays, but what's shown in our plan maybe doesn't actually reflect that. So, but if I got to sit with you, I could show you how that could be configured.
Jim? You said they're trying to get to the budget, or for other reasons you might be obviously willing to work with the Kimball to do whatever. The restaurant on the 4th level and the kitchen on the 5th level, for instance, if they thought that was better served on the lower level, is that a problem?
No.
Is it a problem maybe to cut costs to maybe reduce the height of the building by 1 story if the square footage was adequate?
No.
Are all those things open to your
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, this is an idea. This, if you love it the way it is, I'm happy with it. But I, you know, again, like it's kind of odd for me because I'm used to working more closely with the clients, and it becomes a mutual, you know, shaping of the program. So, you know, I know also Matt and others that have mentioned that, you know, maybe the restaurant's not even going to happen here. You know, so I'm assuming that as we move forward, there could be small changes, there could be wholesale changes. I mean, I don't know once I get to know you guys and work with you, but I think what we've done is we have a framework or concept that I believe is strong enough to survive those changes or those kind of changes. I think we can, the framework is kind of there. So I typically view changes as a way to make things better, you know, particularly when you have a very smart group of people who are interested in making good buildings. You know, it's different when you got someone who wants to change it because they think they're designing it, you know, and they don't understand it. That's a totally different thing. But the opportunity, like I said, I want to make it so that at the end of the day, this building belongs to Park City, not to me. So I anticipate there will be changes and development, if not minor to wholesale changes. I don't really know at this point.
Robin?
I love what you've done with the plaza. I think that would be such an incredible addition. It connects Lower and Upper Main in such a way. It's like where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, a civilization can be born. I can imagine a tree lighting ceremony, events. It's like our own version of the Met Stairs where you would have your lunch and just enjoy the beautiful atmosphere of the mountains. And it's so inviting because that's one of our issues, people walking down Main Street and just continuing to go on and not necessarily seeing the Kimball. I mean, it really addresses that. The material, you said that there's examples of this. Is there a building that you're aware of materials in use that we could talk to?
I just put a like little circle images. There's a building. You know, there's so many materials. Herzog, Demeron had done a building in London using a similar notion. There are many. I can provide you with lots of examples for that that have done a similar strategy. I wish it was a strategy that I completely invented, but it's not. And I'm trying to think of something that comes to my mind.
Closest to this climate, maybe?
What's that?
Closest to this climate?
Yeah, I can provide you with some examples of that.
Oh, that would be great.
As well.
But it is a material that's commonly used for controlling daylighting in art museums or art gallery settings, really throughout the world. It's just, you know, it's not like we're reinventing something or proposing something that's out of the ordinary.
Right, because light is not our friend with art.
Right,
You know.
exactly right. But the system behind that is, you know, it's a conventional curtain wall system with infill framing. So, you know, once I get to know you more too, I would anticipate determining what's solid, what's void, you know, how we kind of treat that enclosure.
I think it's the ultimate compliment when people bring their own metaphors.
I was kind of noticing. But I didn't know if it was a compliment.
I think so, and you might, you know, I too was thought that one of the non-negotiables here is that this is, it's luminous. This could never be turned into a solid box. It has to act as a lantern and a beacon. You know, the night shots, I think, really captured. I think it would probably be the most luminous building in Park City. So just by that contrast, it would probably become a point of reference for this community. So I hope that that is non-negotiable as you begin to talk about how this skin and screen is made.
Well, you know, I'm good at making concepts stick and dealing with sometimes tough budgets, you know, and so I know it's a lot of work ahead of us, and you know, I know this is really the beginning, and I'm anxious to learn more and, you know, do better. I mean, Jim, I fully understand we deal with this all the time, you know, and even our affordable housing clients, the first time we show them a design, that's the first thing they say to me. This is way out of budget. And then I sit down with them and I show it through, and we get contractors to start pricing it. And I actually quarantine the architecture part and show them how much it costs. And then they realize they can take it off, strip it out. They've got a nothing conventional building for very little more. So I think if we get the chance to work with you, you can see that it's not going to be that far-fetched, and that we can get there.
So I have one more question. Because that's so new, never seen it before, how will that building look or age 10, 20 years from now?
Again, I think depending on the material, like someone last night said, is that made out of that stuff you do like greenhouses with, you know, corrugated plastic? If we did it out of that, it's going to look bad quick. Okay, there are some other really high performance materials that could last forever, but you know, these are the kind of discussions we need to have. Okay, that costs X, you want it to last 100 years. This costs Y, it'll last 50. We got to find the sweet spot together to make it work, you know, for your needs. The same thing with like museum quality HVAC, you know, and control systems. We've done a number of these scale projects, and every one of them start out wanting, you know, AAA standard for artwork, and every one of them in the end don't do it because they require 24/7 controls. The power bills go through the roof, the security, the whole thing. It becomes a massive number. So, you know, if you want to do that, we need to reduce money somewhere else. If you don't want to do that, we can increase in other areas. So it's a three-dimensional puzzle. We kind of really need to sit down and get started and engage you and figure out, you know, what are the appropriate choices.
Tina, and then Prescott.
I think the reason there's so much talk about that material is that it's new to us in Park City, and for those of us who've lived here for years and years and have seen so many different things built, you know, there's a snow load factor up here, there's a weather factor, a wind factor, a blizzard factor that people who don't live in Park City often don't appreciate. And so when we look at things, it's how do you drain 10 feet of snow off the top of that outdoor terrace? What happens when ice starts dripping down the inside of the honeycomb system? You know, I think so much of our lives up here centers around the extreme weather that those questions always are always on our minds.
You know, we work with Kevin to address a lot of those, and I hate to repeat this, but we still have a lot of work to do. But I can assure you that if we get to work with you, we will solve all of those issues.
Tina, your question, sorry, is legitimate, right? But the question is still applicable to whether it's a 10-story building, a 4-story building, or something that's long and flat. All of those details need to be very carefully considered. And we have a considerable amount of expertise in making sure that buildings in this climate are weathertight. So I have absolute confidence that it's not going to be an issue.
Prescott.
I'm going to follow up on your response to Jim's question. And I know it's frustrating for you to have such a short window to respond to this, but I think it's enlightening for the board and certainly this jury and the staff. How you come in with that kind of quick take of this place, this institution. It's got a certain tradition, but then project it going forward. And to some degree that speaks both of what is done inside the walls as well as kind of the spirit of Park City. So my kind of, I'd like you to kind of clarify your take on that, and it appears in your kind of architectural response. This place is more about people, activity, almost like a community center, as opposed to, say, this kind of precious institutional box that's absolutely protecting a collection.
Absolutely, that's what I believe, or at least that's my observations. It's the crux of our project is about how it works spatially. And visually, you know, it's important. I think we can do something terrific, but I think really the way we think about it is how the building is designed spatially. We don't make an image and then go, how do we put everything into it? We designed it as a spatial flow. I hope that's coming across. We made it so I could take the roof off and the wall off the model so you can kind of see the space. I didn't want it to just be an object. I want you to see inside because that's the way we think about it. And sometimes when you do something that is evocative, I guess, it kind of detracts from, I think, what my main intentions are is like how this place works and works inside, ties to the street and flows. I mean, ultimately you remember, and I like to say this about our buildings, that I hope that when people visit buildings that we do, that I don't care if they remember what the building looks like, but they never forget being there. And so that's the experience is really what's important. It's the most important thing. It's kind of the experience of the place. So, you know, that is the key for us.